Hello everyone, welcome to Sniper Sundays. It's Sunday the 28th of July. I hope you're all well and had a good weekend. So let's have a market review and look over the past week and more importantly look ahead of next week. Now, next week, first thing I'm going to bring to everybody's attention is the fundamentals next week. Now, if you just look on the calendar for next week, Monday, we've got no news really. It's a quiet day. But then the rest of the week has loads and loads and loads of news. So it's going to be a very, very busy week in the market. Lots and lots of movement. So yeah, I expect a lot of volatility. We have to make sure that risk management is on point next week and everything is kept very, very tight. But I do expect lots of movement. So next week can be a big week for us and lots and lots of pips. So Tuesday, you might have heard me mention a few times now that the Japanese yen hasn't really been doing an awful lot the last couple of weeks. On Tuesday, we got the Bank of Japan coming out. We've got monetary policy statement, a press conference, and then we got some US news as well. So obviously here you can see pairs like USD JPY will be affected, but the Japanese yen in general will be affected on Tuesday. So we'll be looking out for that. Wednesday, there's news from nearly all over the world: New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and then we got the FOMC meeting on for the US dollar on Wednesday at 7 o'clock, and then a press conference as well. So very, very, very busy day on Wednesday. So that's going to keep us on our toes and lots to look out for. Then Thursday we've got lots of GBP news, the pound news, English pound, Bank of England inflation report, big mover for the pound. We've got official bank rate and what they're going to keep the bank rate at. Loads of news coming out. Then we've got the Bank of England Governor Carney speaking. And then again, some US news at 3 o'clock. So loads of news coming out there. And then Friday, more Australian news, retail sales, Canadian news. And then the big one, just to finish off a massive week of fundamentals, is a non-farm payroll on Friday from the US. So that's the biggest data that we get out over the course of the month. So lots and lots to look out for this week. So loads and loads of movement. So let's have a look at the charts. So Euro USD. Let's just have a look. So I'm going to look at a weekly chart, obviously, on all pairs to start our analysis. So we can look at what's happened last week and what's happening the week ahead. So Euro USD, another push down lower, coming down to that key level of support, which is roughly, I had this highlighted last week because it's not perfect. We need to have a little highlighted zone of support. We can see through here around the 1.115 level of 1.1110. And you can see we come down here and tap that on Friday and we're finding some support. Now, on the weekly chart here, as you can see, quite a bearish week. We have now just driven into a key level of support, but I do think that this is going to break a bit lower with such a huge amount of news coming next week. I think that we're going to break this, whether we break and push back up. I do see this being broken next week. So I think that the next key level is 1.100. That could easily be met next week. There's not a lot really supporting us from there. We look back on the weekly chart. Once we break this, we can just see this come down. It looks like we're literally on edge to come down and sort of tap that level. So I'm looking for this to actually break. Whether we'll hit this level, not too sure yet. We'll drop down to the daily chart. You can see here that we have had this doji candle here. But I do expect to just even if we don't push down to this low, remember what I keep saying about that third drive or that last drive to kind of take out the lows before making a bigger move. We have seen that here, so we've had this little push down on the news. But I think if we're going to have a bigger move back up to the upside, we're going to see this come down that little bit lower first. Once this breaks, I think short sellers will jump into the market and really push this down. But there could be a short trap and we may spike back up and then we could see a big push back up to the upside. So key to watch out for this next week. And we'll be looking on trades from here. but I do see a little push to the downside at least first next week, just dependent on what happens with the news, whether we're going to continue that push down and come down to 1.100, or whether we're going to actually pull back and come back up to the upside. We'll be ending the monthly candles next week as well, but that's on Wednesday, I believe, and there's a hell of a lot of news to come out before then. At the moment, we're looking quite bearish on the month, but this could change completely. This could spike all the way back up, so we don't take any notice of that at the moment until it's closed. On a weekly chart, looking quite bearish, but it looks like we just need price wants to try and push through this. So with the fundamentals coming up, that's what might give that push, and then we'll see what happens once we break that level and see how price reacts to this sort of support level. We did have that spike on Thursday off the back of the euro news, but we couldn't manage. You saw how the euro strengthened against everything else, a lot of other pairs, but we couldn't manage to push up any more here with the US dollar gaining a lot of strength towards the end of the week. So that's what we're looking out for. We'll be keeping you updated around the developments of breaking below this support. Euro GBP. So again, weekly chart, you can see here that after that really nice fall, we came all the way back down to 0.8900, this level here. And you can see on the weekly, it's a big retracement before pushing back up. We've actually ended the week on a bullish candle. After about 150 pip pullback, we've actually ended up quite bullish. So looking at this now, we do still have potential to push higher. It's all dependent on the pound. With a lot of news coming out for the pound, we need to keep an eye on this. Now this could be a retracement, but we have to see. But this could be a retracement before pushing higher, but we have to be aware of how long we've been in a bullish trend for. We did have a bit of a pullback here. This could be seen as a pullback before pushing higher, but it can also be seen as a sort of hanging man. Price has tested that level, pushed back up, but the fact that price has been able to push that much lower by sellers means that it could actually roll over and happen again, especially after this shooting star formation. We can just see the strength coming up. It's like, imagine a rocket going up into the sky, and then it's starting to lose steam, and it's slowing down, and then it might start to come down. So we need to, I'm going to be keeping an eye on this. We'll drop down to the daily chart. I'm not saying that we're bullish on this at the moment. We came back up to retest this neckline. Obviously, we're in at the top here. The stop loss is at break even. We came up to retest this neckline, but we didn't really take much notice of that. We just continue to push higher. Now, on the daily chart, we've got two bullish candles, and we're coming up, and we've broken through this sort of trend line here. If I just drop down to the 4 hour, you can see this trend line on the 4 hour. So we need to see now how price reacts here. So obviously, market structure, lower highs, lower lows, and so on. Let me move these out of the way. Like explained on the webinar. So remember, even though we've broken the trend lines are very important. But even though we've broken the trend here, we may be having that third test around this level. We always need to sort of have a highlighted region, excuse me, which I'm going to go into in upcoming webinars and explain to you a bit more how to use it. But yeah, we need to, I've touched on it before about the highlighted zone with a breakout, but there's more detail to go into. But for instance, we need to have a highlighted area around this sort of trend line, because we don't always just hit the trend line perfectly. Like we don't just tap it, pinpoint, and then push away. We more often than not have a bit of manipulation or some moves around it, because it is a great area for the market to get people to try and take a long trade before pulling back, or in an area to get people to take a short trade before pushing back up higher. So we need to understand how to trade them. At the moment, we've broken out higher, 4 hour breakout. As I said, this is something I've taught you before about the breakout strategy. I said there's another sort of rule about trend lines that I'm going to teach you as well. But just for the one that I've explained to you so far, we can see this sort of breakout on the 4 hour. And when I explained about labeling up your the charts, so remember this is the high. We had a lower low, a lower high. So remember, if you just keep that on your chart, and just put that there quickly, lower high, and then we know that this is the next lower low. Until price breaks this level, we're in the downtrend still, because we have creating swing lower lows, lower highs, lower lows, lower highs. So price is trying to break out. Lots of people here will look at this and think, okay, we've broken out the trend line, now take a long, but not necessarily, as we haven't actually broken the downtrend that we are now in. Let me just adjust this. So I'll just drop down to the 1 hour. So you can see here, price has broken out in the 4 hour. We've got this box, the highlighted region that we've got here, and we're struggling to break out of that. So here, if we could continue to struggle here, this could provide us with nice shorting opportunities. And then your stop loss would want to be above this high here, the last lower high. And we might see the next wave of short sellers coming in to push this down even more. Remember, but this is very dependent on the pound news, so we need to be very careful. This may come up and retest this, and this could just push up even higher. So going to be keeping a close eye on this. If you take trades on this, any trades next week, you need to have your stop losses at break even after 30 pips, 20-30 pips constantly, because there's so much news coming out. You need to always protect yourself, because when the news comes out, the market can move very, very quickly. So, for example, as per our rules normally anyway, if you were to take a short here as an example, as soon as you're 20-30 pips in profit, so say this is 80, so we come down to about 60, then we need to move our stop loss to break even. So we are always covered. Price comes down here, rejects the trend line, rejects the bottom of the range, and then pushes back up. We don't mind, because our stop loss is at break even, and we can stay out the market, keep level headed, no emotion, and then look for the next trade. So always keep your stop losses at break even after 20-30 pips this week, because there can be a lot of movement. So at the moment we are still technically in a short-term downtrend overall with this. Remember what I explained on the webinar: outer trend lines, or long-term trend lines, outer trend lines, and inner trend lines. Obviously, long-term, we're in a bullish trend here, but short-term, on the 4 hour here, we are, short to medium term, we are in a downtrend here at the moment. Short-term, we've had a little push up on the 1 hour, but we'll have to see whether this actually is going to continue to push up higher, or if this is just a fake out to push down to the downside. So keeping an eye on that. Euro NZD, I've just kept this nice and clean, even though I broke this down on the live webinar with the monthly key levels. Reason being is I just like to show you how, obviously the monthly key levels are great, show us how to read the market, but also keeping it simple and keeping it nice and clean is also great a way to look at the charts. So see here, we can just see here by the weekly, we've got that 1, 2, third point on the trend line that I keep talking about. Sort of created an inverse head and shoulders across here. Found that support there from around this level. So you can see that support, broken through, but here we found support. And then on the weekly here, we've had a nice strong weekly candle. Not bullish engulfing, but strong nevertheless. On the daily chart then, we had that morning star formation, 1, 2, 3, off the trend line. I remember what I just said about how the trend line, we very rarely just tap it like this and push away. We will break through slightly, like we have here on the daily, to try and bring short sellers into the market, and then we push up. If we can. This is a perfect example of what to look out for on trades. We've had this morning star formation, then wait for the pullback after that morning star formation, to get your entry. So we can see here that morning star formation. Then we had a retrace, which we've seen so many times. If I just drop down to the 4 hour, we have that retrace. Anyone who's been in the group since the beginning, we've seen this happen quite a few times. We have a pullback into our sort of highlighted region of the original sort of range that we're stuck in. When we're making that morning star formation, we pull back, tap that perfectly, and then we shoot off to the upside. We've had quite a few trades like that over the past couple of months. But as I said, a great example to look at on a trade is this, as we had that morning star formation, had that pullback, but even on the 4 hour then as well, you see we had that fake out of the trend line, 4 hour bullish engulfing, and then we just kept pushing from there. So if you didn't even enter from there, which is a valid entry, valid entry after the bullish engulfing and the morning star formation being completed, and with a stop loss just below 30 pips below, then you always have another entry to wait for the pullback. So yeah, still looking for this to go higher at the moment. We have seen a really nice push up on this. Now remember, trend lines, we have to see what direction the market's is going in. So long term, it's in an uptrend, but medium to short term, so you can see here, long term, we got this uptrend. But medium to short term, we have this daily trend line coming across the top here, which I think we are going to come out and touch, but we may see a little bit of a pullback first. We had a big drive up on Friday, so we might have Thursday, Friday, so you might see a little pullback first before coming up to actually tap this. So yeah, I'm keeping an eye on this, but still bullish on Euro NZD, but we'll be looking for a possible pullback on this coming into next week. New Zealand dollar had a big push down as well, but you can see here we're starting to slow down a little bit here. 4-hour chart, 1 hour, ended bearish just at the end of the day. So yeah, looking at price to pull back from here slightly, and before making another push up to the upside. But we'll keep an eye on that next week, and we'll see how that plays out. So Euro AED, quite similar. Kept this nice and clean as well, just to show you weekly chart. How top-down analysis is very important. Start from the weekly, monthly, weekly, and work your way down. So we can see here, find your trend, find the direction of the market by using the trend lines. This is the long-term trend line. You see here 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, and then we've reacted off that beautifully just by having that on our charts and seeing the trend line. Well, here we can see weekly bullish engulfing, which is what I just wanted to point out, showing a lot of strength coming into next week. Daily, you can see here, fake out of the trend line. We had a fake out here, highlight that breakout. See this breakout on the daily, highlight that breakout. I'm talking here. And then see if price can manage to break that or not. We had 3 doji candles showing indecisiveness in the market. It's amazing when you step back and just look on the bigger time frames, you can read price. So we've had a big push down, trying to break the trend. 1 day, 2 day, 3 days of saying, right, no one can decide where this is going next. The bears don't have enough pressure to push this down. Then bang, we break out of this range on this daily candle here. After the breakout, retest of the range on the next day, and we continue going higher. Perfect price action, perfect trades really to look at this. We were looking at this all week, and we could see that what was coming. Especially we knew the Australian news was coming and the Euro news, and we had a big fall on this previously. We were 400-500 pips short on this from the top, so we needed the news to change the direction on this, and that's where using the fundamental analysis comes in line with your technical. So we could see technically we were oversold. We were coming to the trend, that long-term trend line again, and we knew we needed the fundamentals to give this a kick, especially with after 3 days of just being indecisive. We needed something to come in and help us, either the news to break down even lower, which is fine, because if you take a long, you have a stop loss of about 30 pips. If you lose 30 pips, then no bother, we'll wait until the next trade. But you can see here we had the news, and it was worth taking a trade to go long, and for the news to, as I said, give us that kick to push higher. Now, if we just look at this as well, we've got a similar situation. Euro GBP, we're breaking out of the trend here. Drop down to the 4-hour. Had a nice strong break, so we need to keep an eye on this now. Do see this going higher eventually, but I do think that we're going to see a bit of a pullback first, back into this sort of region, and then from here we can always look at maybe another entries. We might go higher, but you can see this level. Let me just use this. I'll take that away. We may come down and retest this support level here. We've got support here, resistance. We come back down, test that as support. If that can hold, then we could see this going higher, a lot higher long term. So we'll get another chance of an entry. If this breaks, then we might see this push down lower. But this is a good setup to look out for with this next week. Look for this to pull back, see how we act around this former support level, and this will create like a 4-hour inverse head and shoulders, left shoulder, head, and may create a right shoulder. GBP USD weekly chart, very, very bearish, literally sitting on support, ready to break through. Big week for pound. because if this breaks, we can see a huge amount of downside. See the pound weaken against the dollar. It's at 1.2380 pounds. You don't get much for your pound if you're exchanging into dollars right now. So yeah, very, very weak for the pound here at the moment. If we break this, we could be looking at coming down to 1.20. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on this. Again, I think we are going to turn around on this and push back up higher. We're going to see some manipulation around these areas. So good to stand back on this one and watch it and see how it reacts. And then we'll pick up on the manipulation and get our entry. Just zooming out on this, you can quite clearly see here we had lower lows, lower highs, lower lows, equal, lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high, and now we're looking to come down and make a lower low. So we need to make a lower low unless we're going to make a clear double bottom and reject this level and push up. But in this downtrend, we look like we're going to make a new lower low here. With such a bearish week, tweezer tops, we pulled back, had that tweezer top rejection from the monthly support or monthly resistance, and we're pushing down. So it looks like we're going to come down and push lower here early next week. I think we're going to make new lows, and then I think we might see a reversal, push back up to the upside. So I'm waiting for this to push down that little bit lower. Obviously, guys, remember everything I tell you is to use along with your own trading. If people want to take shorts for a few pips here, and when we see a break, all these kind of things are up to you. I'm giving you the overall bias, and then you just use what I'm telling you along with your own to take trades. As we saw from last Sniper Sundays, nearly everything that I've covered played out this week. Aussie dollar, New Zealand dollar, Euro NZD, Euro AUD, Euro GBP. So it's about using what I'm showing you and gaining your entries off me giving you my bias, the entry zone, giving you the direction to look for, the areas to look for, and helping you. So obviously you can take your own trades, but yeah, I do see this coming down a little bit lower and then pushing to the upside. So I'll be keeping an eye on that coming into next week. Let's have a look here. Yeah, we're just in a clear downtrend at the moment. Pound is looking very, very weak, but it's often at those times that we might get a kick from the fundamentals, from the news, and then we see a reversal on this. So looking out for this next week. Very, very interesting levels for Euro USD and Euro GBP USD. Let's see how the US dollar acts as well. GBP JPY, kept this quite clear. Just wanted to give you just an example of what we basically spoke about on the webinar. So you can see here, very bearish still. We've had a bit of an indecisive week on the weekly, so we can see not much, a bit of indecision in the market. Try to push higher, but we've now come lower. Get your direction. You can see here, if we put this trend on, you can see we've got our direction is down. We've broken out of trend, but as I said, if you label up your lower lows and lower highs, so say this is the last lower high here, and then the next is a lower low here. Let me just stretch this out, and then we've got the next lower high here, which is these levels here. So then we know that this is our sort of the last lower high. So even though we are in a downtrend, or we've broken broken the trend and pushing higher here, this is the last lower high. So we have to break this level in order for this downtrend to become completely invalid. So we drop down to the 4 hour. You can see here we've got the last lower high, lower low, lower high at this level, and then we've made a new lower low. So we've started to push up and try to break this trend. But even though we broke this trend, it doesn't mean that we've broken the trend line. Doesn't mean we've broken the trend, which is where many get caught out. You can see here we need to break this level in order to invalidate this trend. But what we're actually doing is we saw this price slow down, and we've now looked like we're creating another lower high. So at the moment we are looking quite bearish. We have got this counter trend here that may act as support to help push us back up higher if the pound is going to gain some strength. But should we break this counter trend line strongly, then it looks like we are set to make a new lower low. So if we make a new lower low next week, then obviously we can be looking at trades to make a new lower high, or a possibly new breaking out of the trend and making a new high completely. And we've got Japanese news on Tuesday, so and pound news coming out. So this is going to be a big mover next week. So I'll be watching out for this. Let me just highlight this level here. You're watching for price to come down and see if we can break through this. If we do make a new lower low, then we can be looking out for price to make a new lower high, or a new, as I said, break the trend completely. So we could be looking at a nice trade from sort of down here. But we may also find some support here. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on this next week and keeping an eye on that. USD JPY as well. So as I said, anyone in the group 2-3 weeks ago, this is on a daily. You should still have from this area down here, we had that pin bar. You should still have your long trade. We came down, tried to take us out here, but you should still be in this trade as I am. So on a weekly chart, we got a sort of morning star formation, 1, 2, 3, bullish engulfing there. So it looks like USD JPY is going to go higher next week, but we may see a bit of a pullback first with that the Japanese news, which may also push down GBP JPY first, before it comes any higher. So what I'll be looking out for next week is price to come down and sort of test this sort of region. Come down. We've got this sort of inverse head and shoulders level that we might come down and tap before going higher. So on Tuesday will be interesting to see how we act. At the moment, we've just started to break out of this daily trend line. But remember, this is the last lower high here. So it's an interesting level to keep an eye on. So we'll need to see whether we can break through that and continue a new uptrend, or whether we're going to tap this and push down to the downside. So both are quite key to look out for, and depending on what happens with the news, could be looking at short positions from this level, which would be good sells, or if price comes back down and we reject this sort of level here, we could be looking at long trades. So both options next week that I'll be looking out for, depending on what happens with the news and what happens with price action. But these are key levels to look out for: this support level and this resistance level, the last lower high, to see whether we can actually break that, or whether we've just had a fake out of this trend and we're actually going to push lower. But remember, if we do see a push lower early in the week, that we have got this support level that we need to keep an eye on. USD CAD. So we got stopped out on this for about 30 pips on Friday. We see here we had a big push. Let's get the trend line up. We had a big push, broken out of this trend, and quite strong on the daily. Boxed off the daily level here, as you can see, and then we've had a big push up all the way up to 1.3199. Tried to get that round number of 1.3200, and then we spiked all the way back down, back into that box on the daily. So let's have a look at this on a weekly chart. Remember, it is still looking quite bullish. So though the daily looked like we were pulling back, weekly we've engulfed sort of 1, 2, 3, 4 candles. On the daily, had that bit of a spike, so we need to keep an eye on this next week. Maybe looking for shorts again. 4 hour, we had a nice bearish end to the week that sort of looks like we're going to reverse, but we are just sitting on support at the moment that we've just broken through. So we might use this as a catalyst to push up higher. So yeah, this is what I'm going to be looking out for next week. Should we come back down and break through this counter trend line, come down to sort of test these lines or test this support, then we could break through support, we could look at taking short trades. So we might see a setup similar to coming down to this at the bottom of this sort of range again, coming back up, and then from here we may look at taking short trades. But again, big news for the US dollar Wednesday. We might see some more strength, so we need to keep an eye on that. So lots and lots of setups looking out for next week, but we can't really tell too much yet because there's so many fundamentals that can change things very quickly. Let's just look at the dollar index chart. You can just see here on a weekly how the dollar gained strength. We have got this resistance area coming up through here, that we're sort of tapping into at the moment. So we're keeping an eye on this next week. Can the dollar gain strength and push up higher, make new highs, or will we just see this reverse back down to the downside once more? So that is what is key for many pairs and what happens with the US dollar next week is obviously key to how many trades pairs react. Aussie dollar from last week. Sorry, wrong chart. Aussie dollar. So last week, Sniper Sundays explained we were looking for short trades on this when we were up around this monthly support level. If I just zoom out on the daily to see how the support level and key levels work perfectly. This is normally highlighted as it's a monthly level, but I'm just keeping it clean to show you. See how perfect this works? Weekly, push up to the upside, try to grab people to take long trades, think it'll be broken above the monthly resistance of 0.7050. Then the next week, bang, we drop down a couple of hundred pips. Now, weekly, very, very bearish. Looks like we're going to come down further, retest the bottom of this range back at the 0.6875 level. I drop down to the daily. You can see here, big push down. We broke through the daily trend, and we are now testing the last lower high on that daily trend. So interesting level here. Can we continue to break through and invalidate this this daily trend, or are we going to find support here, make a double bottom, and give us possible entries to take a long trade all the way back up? Now we have broken slightly lower on the 4 hour, so it does look like we're going to continue pushing lower. But are we watching for whether this is a possible long trade opportunity next week, depending on the US dollar? Otherwise, obviously, I'm not going to be looking at that straight away. What I'd want to see here next week is this sort of ranging, consolidating around here for a little while first after that big push down, seeing whether the price can break lower or is going to show us the signs of taking a long trade. But at the moment, looking very, very bearish. Looks like we've got to come down and retest this level. So keeping an eye on that. But off the back of last week, on the Monday, we pushed down as we were expected. I drew on the chart to look for a retest of 0.7050, which we had, spiked a little bit higher. Then we had that 4 hour bearish engulfing, and then from then we never looked back. We was looking to try and get another entry on this, or to get an entry on this after we had that. Obviously expected this to try and push up a little bit higher, but that 0.7050 level just held too strong, and we just kept going down, and as I said, didn't even look back once. We had a little bit of rejection from the support here, the trendline support, but we just continued to die. Similar situation with New Zealand dollar. We pushed down, thought we'd have a little bit more of a pullback, but we didn't get that, and we are now coming down and retesting the daily trend line, which is an interesting level to look out for next week. Down to the 4 hour, just adjust this slightly. So I'll be watching around this level. We haven't quite tapped it yet, but I'll be watching out all around this level for next week. This sort of like highlighted region. See how price reacts against this. Remember, don't look for a perfect just touch and go. We will more than likely come down, see some manipulation and see some consolidation. We figure out what price is going to do, and then we could get a nice long trade from here all the way back up to make new highs, or we may even get an entry if we come down here, consolidate, try to pull back up. See on the lower time frames that when we come back up to the top of this range that we are failing to try and push up higher. You can always get a nice short trade and then ride this down if the US dollar continues to get stronger and come all the way down to 0.7050. So lots of options for us next week, lots to catch up on during the week as the news comes out. Gold, I'm looking at this on the weekly chart just to give us some clarification on what it's actually doing. Last week, you can see very, very little movement. Obviously, we did see movement, but you can see here on a bigger time scale, bigger picture, that not really a lot happened. Sort of an inside bar to the previous week, just very, very little happened. Daily, we had a little push down on Thursday, then a little push back up on Friday, but really nothing is being given away here. Can't really tell too much what's going to happen. We did break this counter trend line on well, actually I had the higher time frame trend line. You can just see here on the smaller time frame that we had a little breakout of this, then we pushed back up. We're sort of stuck in the middle here at the moment, the middle of this range. You can see here the top of the range, the bottom of the range. Let's just use a similar tool that what we have with the monthly, work out the monthly key levels and the weekly. Let's just find out where the middle of this is, say the 50%. So let's just take this out of the way. So you can see here roughly, so obviously these aren't perfect, we can always put these up, but we're roughly sort of in the middle of the range here. So prices come down, try to break the counter trend line, tap in sort of the middle of the range. Looks like we're going to push back up to the upside now, but again, majorly affected by next week with the US dollar news. So standing aside on this at the moment. I'm going to wait for something a bit more obvious to come. Another retest of this level. If we see some rejection of this level, that sort of head and shoulders formation, we could be looking at a short. But gold has the ability to push up even higher and make new highs above this. So I'll be watching out for that next week. And lastly, US oil. Choppy week with this last week. They said it wasn't really too keen on jumping into a trade on this. We can just see here last week, this sort of price action was held within this sort of region, this little consolidation here. Just look at it on a weekly chart. We can see here that just for a simple price action, we've had a push up, couldn't push up higher, bearish engulfing week, very, very, very bearish week. The last week tried to push up higher, but couldn't, and price has been pushed down, seeing that the weight of the bears is on, and it looks like this could push down lower next week. If I drop down to the daily chart, yes, we have this trend line here. You see how we're hugging it closely. What I explained on the webinar, very, very good thing to understand is we're not just pushing away and breaking away from this. We've had 0.1 here, 0.2, we've come down 0.3, and we're still hovering around this area. Thursday, daily candle, very, very bearish. See this big push down. Friday, we tried to push up, not getting much joy. If I just put a support line across here to form a support, you can see here we're struggling to break above. Go down to the 4 hour, very, very choppy here at the moment. Get rid of that for the moment. Put a trend line on, get the direction, come down here. You can see we may sort of reject this level again. If we can't break above this and we fail, I do see this trend line snapping with oil, and I do think that is possible. Even though a lot of people are bullish on oil at the moment, I do think it's possible we could even come back down to $50 once again. So, very, very interesting. Very, very interesting for oil. You could be looking at taking short trades next week, riding this down for 500 pips. But should the news affect us differently, and we do manage to get a push up on this from this level, this counter or this trend line, and we can break above here, then we could come back up to the 60 level. But at the moment, you can just see here we've had touch 1, touch 2, touch 3, touch 4, touch 5. We can't get away from it. We're just dancing around this level at the moment. So if this should snap and have a bearish break, I think that we could see this come down back down to $50 a barrel. I think it's possible. Let's see what happens next week. Let's look on a bigger time frame. We have the longer term trend line here. Now it doesn't seem so crazy that this could come down and sort of retest that. If we do break this inner trend line here, then I think we're going to come down and test this. If that breaks, then we're coming down even lower. But yeah, I do think there's a couple of hundred pips to come down to the downside here should we break. So looking out for that next week. We'll be updating loads because there's so much fundamentals next week. There's so much going on. Quiet start to the week tomorrow, but then from then onwards, it's busy. A very, 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 very busy week. So catch up with you on Monday morning for the morning call. Hope you take that all in, and we'll catch up then. Have a good evening. Thank you.